Hey everybody, Tara Vostenkemper here from the Counseling Hub, founder and clinical director, and also a practicing counselor in the state of Missouri. So I was having a conversation with somebody the other day and asked me a pretty good question. They wanted to know what makes talking to a therapist or counselor different than talking with friends or family for that matter, or clergy or a pastor. They want to know basically what's the difference. So why should I do therapy versus just have a drink and conversation with a good friend? So there's a few things that came to mind. And all of this, I would say, exists on a continuum. So, a relationship that you have with your counselor or therapist is very personal. It's very much dependent on you and dependent on your counselor or therapist. So what I'm going to give you is kind of generalities, and these are things that are based on my experience and based on the things that I've read and the people who have trained me and my mentors, etc. But the reality is that if you asked another therapist, you would get probably a lot of overlap between our answers, but I'm sure you would get some differences as well. So here's 5 things that make talking to a therapist different than talking to talking to friends, excuse me. So the first is disclosure. So the whole time you're talking to your therapist, you're the one disclosing. So your therapist isn't responding with, I know, that's exactly how I feel too. Your therapist isn't giving you that sort of feedback. Your therapist should be listening intently and trying to pick up on any patterns or styles of communication, or your therapist, the hour is literally just about you. So if you have a friend that you don't know anything about and that only listens, maybe that's actually like a therapist. But most friendships are give and take. Most are back and forth, Most are both people talking during a conversation. Therapy hour is pretty specific to just one person talking, and for good reason. You're paying for a session and you're trying to grow in a very specific way, more than likely. So you deserve all of the space. So that's one way. So disclosure. So you're not going to your therapist should not be telling their problems to you or saying that they're also going through a divorce, or they're also moving, or they're also struggling with their child, or they're also trying to lose weight, or they're also whatever else. And disclosing that they've done something or that they've had experience with something is different than saying, I'm currently struggling with this as well. So saying, yeah, I've dealt with an eating disorder in my life is different than I'm fighting anorexia right now. Or I hope that makes sense. So having gone through an experience and disclosing that they are through the experience is something that's a little bit different than being in the middle of it and not having resolved any of it and then bringing that to the table. So that's one of the main things is disclosure. Most of the hour, if not all of it really, is focused on you as the client. The second thing is that therapy should absolutely be a judgment-free zone. There are very, very few things, if any, that you should be judged on in a therapy session. None, really. You're there for support and to disclose things that are going on, some things that are probably really, really difficult to talk about. You might be talking about trauma, you might be talking about relationships, you might be talking about anxiety or depression or whatever. You're going to be talking about things that are very personal and hard to talk about. And with friends are fantastic. We all need them and love them and cherish them. And they're not usually free from judgment. And that is, they let their own values kind of get in the way, and, maybe they tell you what you should be doing or what you shouldn't be doing. Maybe they, maybe they're trying to give you advice on how to live your life. Versus with therapy, and that I think ties in with the judgment piece. Not only is there no judgment, but we're not trying to tell you what to do with your life. And I think I talked about this before in a different video. If you have a therapist who's telling you what decisions you should make, leave. don't see that therapist anymore, or say, you know, I don't want to hear what I should do. I just want some feedback on the decisions I'm making. So those are two things. So one is, again, disclosure, meaning that you're going to disclose a lot more to therapists and you're not going to get nearly that same amount of information back. It's a very one-sided relationship, rightfully so. The second is judgment. There we go. I was like, I'm at a loss for words. The second is judgment, that your therapist should, that therapy is ideally a judgment-free zone, you know, that you come and non-judgmental. That's it's a very, very common word in therapy and counseling. That's very important to a lot of us. One of the third things you're going to get is honest feedback. So again, your friends are probably biased. I mean, they're your friends for a reason. They love you, they want the best for you, etc. But they also don't want to see you hurt. Most people with friends will be very nice and loving and supportive no matter what. And therapists can be all of those things, very gentle and nice and supportive. And they will give, hopefully, very direct / honest feedback. So in a really nice way, we are trained to call people out on things that we see. You know, we're trained to say, you're telling me this and you're acting this way and it doesn't make any sense to me. We're trained to say things like, I hear your concern and I'm noticing that your actions aren't changing. You know, we're trained to say, you tell me this is your value system and these are the thoughts you keep. We're trained to basically call out bullshit as we see it. Again, you can do it really loving and really nice. It doesn't have to be this mean, attacking sort of thing. It's not. It's usually very nice. But we're not in the business we're in the business to help people long term. We're not in the business to make people feel better all the time. We are in the business in the counseling profession, I should say, to give direct feedback and help people grow in ways that sometimes is painful. To hear honest feedback sometimes, we don't always want it. And difference between therapists and friends, you know, your counselor or therapist is more likely to give you that honest, direct feedback that might feel a little bit sharp at first, but helps significantly in the long run, whereas your friend might want to not hurt your feelings in the moment. So the other thing is, and I mean, I have this as my, you know, point number 4, but it might really be tied in with point number 3, is you're going to get feedback without criticism. So whenever you are getting feedback from your therapist, it's not to demean you or minimize your experience, or it's not to be an asshole towards you. It's literally to say, these things are conflictual, like they're conflicting. I'm not quite sure what's going on with them. You tell me, you know, I want to understand where you're coming from with these things. It's really to get you to think more about your own life and what you're doing and how you're acting and what you're saying and etc. So a friend might come across in a critical sort of way whenever if they do give honest feedback, or when they do give honest feedback. A lot of friends will. It might come across as critical, you know. Therapists are trained to be aware of their value system and hopefully set it aside so that way it doesn't get in the way of giving that honest feedback to clients. So 4 points so far, right? The first is disclosure, which is that a lot of self-disclosure on the client side and very, very minimal, if any, on the therapist side. The second is judgment, that therapists and counselors are trained to be very non-judgmental, to be very accepting of a lot of different things. Number 3 is the honest feedback piece, right? And number 4 is also feedback, but without criticism. So being really honest about what we see going on, and then also doing it in such a way that we're not, hopefully not attacking or criticizing or making you feel especially bad about something. The last thing I want to say is, or the final point I should say, is that is really that there's just less baggage. I mean, not that therapists have less baggage. I don't mean that, because every therapist you meet, every counselor is human. Everybody has something they're carrying with them. But less baggage in that you come into a therapy office or a counseling office as a client and you present what you want. So if I'm working with someone who tells me about their history of intense drug use and fighting and run-ins with the law and being a self-disclosed ass in many ways, and they present in my office as smart and funny and nice and not struggling with drugs and not having run-ins with the law, excuse me. If I was your friend, I would know and maybe have experienced all of these other things, but seeing as how I'm your therapist and you come in and I meet you, that stuff's not going to get in the way. I don't know you from that. I have no idea about that piece of your life other than what you tell me. I haven't experienced you in that context. Therefore, it does not get in the way of our relationship. That is one of the biggest differences, is that most of our friends know us from, I mean, you know, I think my oldest friend dates back to 3rd grade or something. She knows a lot about my life and a lot about me. I don't want to go see her for therapy. I want to be friends with her, and she knows a lot. So it's hard to separate that. So if you're saying, do I talk to a friend or a therapist? It's really hard to separate what you know about somebody once you know it, once you've experienced it with them is a better way of saying it. It's really hard to set that aside and be with them in whatever it is that's going on with them, if that makes sense. So if I'm going through a breakup and I go to talk to my friend and my friend's like, you've done this with 15 other guys, you do the same thing all the time, what's the deal? That's not really helpful. If I go to a therapist and I say, this is the deal and this is a pattern for me, my therapist is going to help me figure out what's the pattern, how's it being played out right now, what I can do different about it, because they just haven't seen me through the other 15 people, if that makes sense. I think it does. So to sum up the 5 pretty distinct differences between a friendship and a therapist, again, first is disclosure. I think I've gone over these a handful of times now, but the first one is disclosure, really. So self-disclosure on the client's part and very little, again, if any, on the therapist's part. The second is the judgment. So you're going to come to a non-judgmental place to disclose the things that are going on for you and what you want to work on. The third is honest feedback. You will get, hopefully, this is my style. So again, this is coming from me. You're going to get honest and direct feedback from your therapist about the way that they experience you, about the way that about your relationship that you have between the two of you, which can be really telling for outside of the therapy office, about patterns they're seeing, about things that are showing up, about etc., about anything. The fourth piece is you're going to get that feedback without criticism. So not hopefully, you should get that feedback without any level of contempt or criticism, or it shouldn't feel attacking. It should feel like coming from a kind place. And then the last piece is that your therapist hasn't lived through your baggage. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So that can be a huge difference. Yeah, so that's all that I have for you today. Questions, comments, feedback, you know the routine. Leave it below. Other than that, you can reach out to me directly with thoughts or questions or just a direct line of communication at Tara, T-A-R-A, at thecounselinghub.com. Have a fantastic day. I'll see you at the next video. Bye.